Ciao a tutti. In this video, I will be with Francesco from Italia, and we will be talking about the different languages of Italy. Now, you might be surprised that I said languages because you probably only thought of Italiano, but there's actually different dialects and languages in that country, and Francesco knows a lot about that. So it will be really, really nice to hear from Francesco what is happening in Italy or what has been happening in Italy over the past decades, of course. Francesco, could you please introduce yourself and also say why you love all these Italian languages so much?
Hi, nice to meet you, everyone. It's basically, I'm Francesco, and I've been living outside of Italy for quite a few years now, but I'm from Tuscany. And yeah, I'm very passionate about languages of Italy, languages in general, but languages of Italy are a very big passion of mine. And I really enjoy the whole linguistic environment. There's a lot of variety, as you said. And it's not really well known, not even by many Italians, but Italy is has the most amount of languages at a European level.
Oh, wow.
Uh, it's comparable to some, like, yeah, I would say India and the Caucasus. So basically, yeah, it's a very, very diverse environment. As I said, yeah, as you said, like many languages, many dialects. Uh, if you count the whole amount, it would be, not considering dialects, I'm saying languages, it's 34.
34
Yeah,
languages in
it's crazy.
Italy.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm especially surprised about what you said, like comparing it to India, where we all know that there's so many different
Yeah,
languages.
yeah.
Wow, that's really, really diverse.
Especially considering like the proportions of, yeah, no, like the country's a lot smaller than India. It's
Hmm.
just barely, yeah, a little bit more than 60 million people. But the country's fairly young considering it was unified in 1861. It's very, very peculiar and
Interesting,
yeah.
interesting. How many dialects do you think there are? Is there like an estimation of how many?
It's it's a bit more complex because the numbers get a little bit tricky to try and like, and there's also like the whole, trying to uh, define, to give a
Hmm.
definition, what is a language and what is a dialect. I mean, social linguistically, it makes sense. I would normally, like, when I normally speak about like this environment in Italy, I just speak of variety because I think it's the best option. Like you
Hmm.
don't get
Hmm.
into this sort of like strange environment where you don't know how to give a definition of dialect and language.
Yeah.
So it's like it's just variety. So there's
Or
tons of varieties,
mhm.
I'd say.
Or
And
strange political debates.
yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
exactly.
Hmm.
So the whole thing, I mean, if you consider dialects of Italian, it's just the central part. So basically, the dialects of Tuscany and the central part with Lazio, Umbria, and the central part of Marche. But apart from that, generally there's a coexistence of like Italian and regional Italian. So basically, that
Hmm.
is a dialect of Italian and a regional language or a minority language belonging to the environment. So the whole thing is basically a situation where there's a it's not bilingualism, it's diglossia. So
Hmm.
there's
Hmm.
this whole situation where people know two languages, and there's a spectrum where they switch from one to the other or go to like towards something closer to the regional language or closer to Italian. It just depends on the situation, on the
Hmm.
social situation, on the yeah, it's very yeah, there's a lot of influences, I'd say.
Awesome. So, where are you from?
I'm from Tuscany, and I was like from a very small town. It's called Buggiano,
Hmm.
and it's in the province of Pistoia, just in the middle, between Pisa and Florence, 50 kilometers
Beautiful.
from one to the other. It's just like basically in the middle. But my family is not from there. My father comes from Puglia,
Hmm.
from Apulia, from Martina Franca. Is a big town, fairly
Hmm.
50,000 people, and there they speak a variety of Apulo Barese which is a dialect of the Neapolitan language.
Wow.
So, and it's quite different
Uh-huh.
from standard Italian, and so it's a different, very different language. It's another Romance language,
Wow.
basically.
Wow. And your
It's one of
mom?
the varieties. My mom comes from Florence,
Mm-hmm.
but my like the environment also in my mother's side is quite diverse because my grandpa of course was Florentine, but my grandma came from a small village of Le Marche,
Mm-hmm.
but in the
Mm-hmm.
northern part, close to San Marino, where they speak a sort of like a variety of uh, it's a strange variety of like that. It's between Romagnolo and Central varieties. So like it drops already some characteristics of Romagnolo, but it's
Mm-hmm.
basically sort of the same.
Wow. So then there can already be diversity in families, right? If one
Yeah,
parent is from
definitely.
a region and then another parent is from another region. Now, how was that at home? Did you just speak Italian, like standard Italian, or there were two dialects spoken at home or languages?
I was well, I mean, my father is bilingual.
Yeah.
So he basically was mainly using Italian, but then sometimes it was using like uh, his own variety,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
and also I was able to speak it because the whole rest of the family is in southern Italy, in Martina
Mm-hmm.
Franca or close by,
Wow. Yeah.
except from cousins being like the cousins that live around Italy. But mainly, like when I go there, especially like I was actually there like last month, the whole month in August, I was able to practice a little bit the language because I studied it properly. Like I was, I always say I have like not fully functional bilingualism in the sense of like it's a language of immigration, so I wasn't exposed to the language on a
Mm-hmm.
daily basis
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
living on the territory. It's
Of
like
course.
when people from, I don't know, from another country, like they learn the language through their
Mm-hmm.
parents but they
Mm-hmm.
live in another
Of
environment, so
course.
they don't really function properly
Mm-hmm.
as a bilingual person unless they're educated in that language. And the
Mm-hmm.
thing is, like, I would say, like, in the years I got better and better. I'm also aware of the written version because most of the time these languages are oral languages
Mm-hmm.
because we switched from a situation of like in Italy being illiterate in a language
Mm-hmm.
to a sort of like process of like forming people and giving like schooling and everything
Mm-hmm.
in Italian.
Mm-hmm.
So people know how to read and write in Italian, but they don't
Mm-hmm.
know how to read and write in their own local language most of the time.
Interesting.
Uh,
But then
yeah.
when you send WhatsApp messages to your family, for example, like if an Italian sends a WhatsApp message to their family, is it most likely to be in the dialect or in the standard
It
Italian?
depends. It
Yeah?
depends on the
Both.
situation. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
because I tend to use it. I tend to use the local dialect, the local language.
Mm-hmm.
With my father, is for example, is it's something that during the years he started to recognize that I was trying
Mm-hmm.
to revitalize the whole
Nice.
relationship with the language. So he appreciated it, and he's sort of like like there's an exchange with
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's this whole situation like when people say like, well, should I learn a regional language or an local dialect?
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, I say why not? I mean,
Yeah.
in the end, like it's just like richness and a
Mm-hmm.
new possibility of getting in touch, especially with older generations.
Mm-hmm.
If you have, for example, friends or even your couple comes from a specific part of Italy where
Mm-hmm.
they, especially the older generation, grandpas and grandmas, still speak active speakers of the language, the local language. It's a very good way of engaging, especially like if you are exposed to the situation of like older people speaking with people, let's say like from the 50s, the 60s, but
Mm-hmm.
there you're also with other people from the 30s or whatever, or the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
40s. Is just still there's a situation in which like the exchange might be going on in the
Yeah,
local
that's
language.
true.
So
Mm-hmm.
if you're there and you don't get anything at all, you might be confused, or
Yeah.
it's just an added value. And I think it depends on the situation, as I said.
Mm-hmm.
Like if
Mm-hmm.
if your partner comes from an area
Mm-hmm.
where there's a regional language, which is most of the time the case, but I'd say it's something that adds a little bit of value.
Mm-hmm.
If you're probably like, there's tons of people that are have Italian heritage and are studying Italian. Most of the
Mm-hmm.
time, they don't realize, well, their grandparents or even before, when they moved outside of the country, they weren't speaking Italian. They were speaking like the local language, the regional
Yeah,
language.
interesting.
So there's this whole process of people like getting in touch with their Italian side, but not
Exactly.
really with the linguistic properly,
Mm.
their linguistic heritage. So I'd say like, yeah, of course, Italian is a useful language because if you
Mm-hmm.
travel to Italy, you use it basically anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone pretty much, except from very, very few yeah, people in a few situations, they don't speak Italian, but it's very, very rare nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
If there's someone, like having the possibility to, like, yeah, learn the local languages, also to get back on their heritage. Basically, it's what I'm doing with my linguistic heritage, like the linguistic heritage of my family.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also doing that with my grandma's variety, because it's well, she passed away in February, so I wanted to, like, keep alive the whole thing. And I'm working with my mother because she's still um, like partially a speaker. Well, no,
Yeah.
not partially, but she didn't use the language in a long time. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just like trying to restart the whole thing, because she wasn't speaking the language with her mother,
Mm-hmm.
and she was speaking the language with her grandma. And most of the time is the case because people born in the 50s and the 60s
Mm-hmm.
had a sort of like, well, being exposed to television, the radio, and in the family also. There's this whole thing where people were not really. Well, there was this sort of like stigma of like
Mm-hmm.
speaking the local language,
Mm-hmm.
which was totally, uh, well, not really aware of what actually is
Mm-hmm.
the the right
Mm-hmm.
uh, approach. Because most of the time is like people were saying, oh, if you speak the local language, you're not, you're ignorant, or you're a
Mm-hmm.
peasant, or you're,
Mm-hmm.
like there's this whole like
Yeah.
very, very bad approach to
Mm-hmm.
the thing.
Unfortunately, I've seen that in many places, many, many places. I've heard it about China. Um, I've lived in Peru for many times where I've also seen Quechua isn't always accepted, isn't always, appreciated. And it's such a pity because indeed, in the end, language, what you said, it makes you connect with the culture through the music or through the stories or just nice words, right? Like maybe
Yeah,
your grandparents said words to you back in the day and you didn't realize it was part of a local language, right? A variety.
right.
And then connecting with that is really connecting to indeed your roots and to the culture that your grandparents were part of. So I think it's really, really special you're doing this. And I think the conclusion is for anyone who's watching this video that if you're a learner of the Italian language and you have some spare time to look at the local languages, the varieties that actually exist, because it will enable you to have like even stronger connections with the older generations, but also just like with the regions of Italy, you'll better understand what is really happening in the country and what has already happened in the country historically. So I think that's really, really valuable. Now, my question is how should people learn these dialects? Because I could imagine, and languages, I could imagine that there aren't that many resources out there. You just mentioned that it's mainly like very often, most of the times, it's more like oral languages. So is the
Mhm.
only solution to go to a small town in Italy and start talking to the elderly, or what is the approach here?
Well, there's that. It's also very valuable, but luckily, there's something new, fairly new that I created,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a website. It's called linguedialetti.it.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it's a website that I created out of a situation in which, like, I realized there was nothing like this.
Mm-hmm.
I was starting to accumulate very different resources, links with, let's say, dictionaries or grammars or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, like really different things that I was able to find basically around on the websites and on the internet. And most of the time, there's websites that have not really that much of a web traffic, so they're not really visible.
Mm-hmm.
And especially there was not really an environment where you could find them all together.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, as a user, I was not able to find anything like this. So I was like, well, why not? Uh,
Create it.
and yeah, exactly. And I ended up creating it, and yeah, it's already available online. There's some parts that are still, it's all every time is just like developing and having new resources. But up until now, there's already 600 links on the website, and you can find basically so many varieties that are already available. Some varieties are not, but mostly I covered the northern part for the moment and Sardinia
Mm-hmm.
and other small clusters. It's an ongoing research and an ongoing work, basically, and it's a digital library where you
Mm-hmm.
can find basically resources to, like maybe there's a literature you can read once you're further down in
Mm-hmm.
the that because it covers basically like the different levels. I
Mm-hmm.
would say, like, if you want to approach it from the very first approach, there's dictionaries where you can learn words or sometimes grammars. It's just really it's full of different resources and things that you can find. And the whole thing is like it's some of the varieties that are recognized in Italy, especially like
Mm-hmm.
well, there are 12 recognized languages.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the most have the most resources. And yeah, otherwise, if it's a non-recognized language by the state, there's also tons of resources
Mm-hmm.
anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you cannot, like, it's a lot a little bit less easier to like, because there's no standard. And so what I suggest is, like, try and find the urban variety
Mm-hmm.
closest to
Mm-hmm.
the local language that you're looking for, so you
Mm-hmm.
can that there's a little bit more resources. Like, if you're let's say you want to learn the variety of a small town in Lombardia, maybe you can try and find like resources for Milanese or Bergamasco. But otherwise, once you are a little bit in the language and already
Mm-hmm.
knowing a little bit, try and jump and go to the local shops, to the local bookshops, because you most of the time you can find really
Great.
something to learn, and something, and people actually really appreciate when you go and look for these things.
Great. Now, I'm so curious about them, and I wonder how different they are from Italian. But instead of you telling us how different they are, it probably depends on the variety and all. I
Yeah.
just really, really suggest everyone to go to the website that Francesco made and have a look for yourself. Like, just click on all the links that are on there. On the left, you saw the menu with all the different varieties, and have fun exploring. And you'll see that
Mm.
some might be more different to the standard Italian that you're used to, and others will be more similar to Latin, right? I heard.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's some, like, there's the whole thing, because Italy has the three varieties, well, the three
Mm-hmm.
main family language,
Language
language
families.
families,
Yeah.
yeah, there are in Europe, because
Mm-hmm.
there's Slavic languages at
Mm-hmm.
the border with the
Wow.
yeah, with the Slovenia, and then you have Germanic languages in the northern part,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have Romance languages,
Mm-hmm.
plus you have varieties of Albanian and Greek, which are
Awesome.
Indo-European isolates. So it's
Yes.
just like very, very diverse.
Great.
There's so many things really. I just wanted to add that apart from like the website where you can find, of course, the resources, I normally do streaming on Twitch, and I speak about these things most of the time. Basically, I do
Mm-hmm.
language learning sessions, also about like smaller languages like this, like
Mm-hmm.
minority languages,
Mm-hmm.
and then I play GeoGuessr, like exploring the words, speaking the in many different languages. Mostly,
Nice.
I do Italian on Mondays. On Tuesdays, I do Spanish, and on Fridays, I switch between Catalan and English. But there's
Awesome.
also like special live streams where I speak probably like a specific language, be
Mm-hmm.
it Occitan or Neapolitan or whatever. So it's
Awesome.
a very diverse environment where it's I always make this comparison. There's several different flowers in a garden,
Mm-hmm.
and it's comparable to have like if you have just one language, it's just like having flowers of just one color.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have many different languages and you respect the diversity, you have a colorful environment where you can find so many different flowers, and a garden where there's biodiversity which is comparable to what we have in Italy. And
Yeah.
I think it's the best option, as we respect like it's
Mm-hmm.
an ecolinguist approach in this situation. And in Italy, we respect a lot the gastronomy and the different tastes, and the different art and the different history. There's
Mm-hmm.
so many different things really that we actually value a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the right time to start and value also the linguistic diversity that we have in the country, which is
Definitely.
uh, which is fundamental to like to keep on living, because we always speak about like languages dying, and most of
Mm-hmm.
the time we
Mm-hmm.
just think about like very remote parts of the world, but it's actually close by.
Definitely, definitely. I really appreciate that comment you made because I also see it as the world. We have so many languages, so much variety in the world, and I always try to promote that, no language is better than the other, and no culture is better than the other. So it's really cool to already start embracing that within Europe or within Italy, and then seeing that as like across the globe. So thank you so much for everything you've shared, all the enthusiasm. And I think that everyone who watches this video is excited to learn more about the variety in Italy. So thank you for sharing that, and hope to see you in another video.
It was a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me, and whenever you want, I'm available to speak about these things again.
Awesome. Take care. Ciao.
Bye, ciao.